So now is the fun bit as well. Tana came to our community a few months ago, and her mission is close to my heart, to say the least. But the experience that she's had to go through to get to this space is phenomenal. And I'm in awe of what she has been through and what she does on a daily basis. And I love her to pieces. So I'm going to hand over now to Tana, who's going to be sharing her journey to where she is today.
Thank you very much. A little bit of a croaky voice. So I'm here with my counterpart. This is Bert. He's my monkey. He is part of my whole story. And he comes out and about with me all over the place in public venues to inspire conversation about mental health, which is the heart and soul of everything that I do. And when Jill asked me to speak, I was thinking, well, when did this journey to doing what I'm doing actually start? It was in April 1960, when my mother was 16 weeks pregnant with me, and she was given the news that she had acquired an autoimmune immune illness that was going to render her quadriplegic and that it was terminal. And she had two small children. She had two toddlers, a baby on the way. And that's exactly what happened. She was quadriplegic by the time I was two, and she died when I was seven, at a time when there was no therapy, there was nobody to talk to. In fact, we were told not to talk about her death because Dad had been through too much. And I buried everything that I'd experienced, and very successfully. In I fell into teaching when I was 29, out of a career in the city, which was never a place I wanted to be in the first place. And it literally fell into teaching. Had never been trained as a teacher, walked into a classroom not knowing who should go first, the pupils or me. But that led to 25 years of something I absolutely adored. I didn't know at the time that everything I did to inspire young people to come out of the shadows and know who they were and to be seen by others was actually because in my own heart I had never been seen, and I'd always lived my life believing that I was invisible. And that came from the fact that nobody saw the pain, the grief, the loss that I felt as a child, and nobody actually asked how I was. So that kind of was the path that I thought was going to take me through to the end of my journey. And then in 2013, I very unexpectedly was triggered by the passing of an ambulance to have a catastrophic breakdown as I was driving on a dual carriageway that resulted in my spending not the promised 3 days in a London psychiatric hospital for assessment, but a full 6 months. And that 6 months brought my teaching career to a very abrupt and unwanted end and hurtled me into a deep level of bereavement, actually. But when you're in hospital for 6 months and everybody's coming in just for a few days or 2 weeks at most, you meet a lot of other people. And I think one of the things I do best is to open up conversation with people. And I wanted to understand why so many ordinary people I met around the coffee percolator could be in a place like that. What was it that so many ordinary people, what happened to us that could bring us to the point of having really severe mental health problems? For some, there was obvious real life trauma, and you could totally understand why might end up with depression or being suicidal. But for the vast majority, when I started pulling threads on them, I discovered really it went back to patterns that were created in childhood and patterns that created beliefs in them that then directed everything, their response to the world completely. And I've developed over the years a program called Monkey Wisdom, which looks at the fact that we all have a monkey born with us, and he lives on our shoulder for the whole of our lives and actually directs all of our behaviors to every single thing that we experience based on what we experienced as children from conception onwards, not just from birth. And I've been pulling threads on the lives of children and adults for the last 12 years deliberately to help them to understand what made one person face the world with anger or have no self-confidence or be very fearful or want to keep in the shadows, what makes one the bully and the other one the victim, and so on and so forth. And it's become an exciting and wonderful journey of helping people to understand things that they've hidden and probably never acknowledged in the thinking mind, but is buried deeply in their subconscious. and unravel that so that they can release themselves to the life that they would really like to live. And obviously, most of my work is really grounded in prevention. So for me, it's about changing the understanding that we have as human beings about the impact of every single word that is ever said to a child at any age, about a child in their earshot, or even about somebody else entirely different, like perhaps a colleague talking with your partner about a colleague, but the child believes it's about them. Name calling in the playground has far bigger impact than anybody would recognize. I can't tell you how many children from the age of 8 to 20 who I have worked with who've been deeply suicidal because they were name called, they were called fat or thick or ginger nut or whatever it might be through primary school. So I help children to understand why they are who they are, and I help adults to understand why they are who they are and why we face the world in the way that we do, and what the voice is in our heads that tells us to react as we do to everything that life throws at us. And I help people to unravel that and then to overturn that by using one of the most powerful tools we have, which is our imagination. And it is extraordinary how powerful imagination can be in changing the outcome of our lives. And I wrote this book, which I published in 2024, which is There's a Monkey on Your Shoulder, not surprisingly, which was actually a novel for teenagers, but also for adults to read. And I'm just thrilled to discover that grown-ups of all ages are immersing themselves in it and getting a lot out of it. And it's a novel. It's a real high octane adventure with 8 teenagers, each with a different monkey on their shoulder, who are invited to go on a personal development trip to the north coast of Scotland, where they face ever bigger challenges, as we all do in our lives. And we can see from the outset that each has a different monkey with a completely different personality and is the voice that drives their response to everything. They don't know anything about them until halfway through the book when they're about to be left on the island for 24 hours on their own. And they're told that they have an in monkey and they think it's bullshit, excuse my words, but they think it's absolute rubbish. And then they start paying attention to the thoughts that they have and realizing the patterns and the thinking and not just noticing in themselves, but in the other people around them as well. And it's a book about hope. And I discovered there's a whole group of 60 to 90-year-olds in Kent who've been reading it and passing it around and started a book club of their own because they wanted to talk about it. But I want to finish just with a very quick story that I'd run workshops in a big corporate organization recently. And the person who invited me, I have not spoken to for a year, but she had got hold of me when she discovered about my book. And she runs a book club and she'd asked me to go and speak at the book club and take my book along. And afterwards, we'd had a conversation that was deeply personal to her about what was holding her back and about the fact that there were things that she really wanted to achieve in her life and thought were never going to be possible. So I shared with her the tools that I give people to help you completely turn around your thoughts and your thinking that helps to pull threads on and unleash things that you've held on to forever. Anyway, long story short, I arrived to do this workshop and she presented me with a bouquet of flowers. And I said, I haven't even spoken yet. You don't know what this is going to be like. And she said, no, this is nothing to do with the presentation you're giving today. This is from me to you personally to thank you for what you said after we had the book club workshop. And she had told me that she and her husband had been trying to get pregnant. They'd wanted a family for years and it hadn't happened. And she said, it's my greatest sadness. And I said, it doesn't have to be that way. But as long as you think it's never going to happen, it hasn't got a chance. You have to shift the energy. And I gave her all the tools that I work with. And I said, you have to live every day as if you already have that child in your arms with the excitement and the thrill and the delight and feel it in your body on a daily basis. That was the last time we spoke. When I saw her, she gave me the bunch of flowers. She said, we took on board. It took a bit of persuasion with my husband, but he came on board and we've literally talked about this baby all the way through. And I wanted you to be the first to know that we are pregnant. I obviously didn't create the pregnancy. but I gave them the space in their lives and their thinking and their emotions to feel differently and for that possibility to happen. And she was just, to have that meant so much. I've got goosebumps now that there is real impact in this work. And my belief is, and I want to finish on this, my belief is that there is a real solution to the global mental health crisis. And it doesn't lie in medication and therapy, although, of course, it's much needed by the already wounded. It lies in putting the focus on prevention. And by that, I mean changing the life experiences of children from conception onwards, because every single thing that they experience from the moment of their conception that creates an emotional experience in them lays a pebble in the path towards potential thriving and emotional resilience, or or for the potential for them to have mental health problems later on in life. And when you consider that over 50% of all adult mental health illnesses are already embedded by the age of 14, you can see why this work is so important. And that's why I'm here on CoGlow, to find others who will share this journey and help us to really create a shift around the way we interact with children. Thank you.
Beautiful. Well said, Tana.